Tell us about a time you were glad you actually read the paperwork before signing it. Serious replies only. When I decided I was ready to propose to my girlfriend, I went to a fairly well-known jewelry store for a ring. I wanted the proposal to be a surprise, but I figured she might want to exchange it for something else, so I asked the staff in advance whether I could get my $900 back if necessary. They told me I could. I proposed. Just as I expected, my fiancée found a different ring she liked more at another store, so I went back to the first shop and asked for a refund. The employee looked at me and said, "No problem, just sign this first." I glanced at the small form she handed me and was about to sign it when I noticed a line in tiny print. I acknowledged that this purchase is final and cannot be refunded. I look at her and ask, "Am I seriously supposed to sign this?" She takes the paper back, calls over the manager, and he immediately processes a full refund to my card without any questions. For anyone wondering, this was at Shine Jewelers in Vancouver. I'm a musician. One time I was about to sign with a label. The contract was written in very, very broken English. The whole document was packed with nonsense, but the parts that especially got me were 1. I had to give them my name. 2. I had to give up the copyright to all of my old songs. If they didn't sell all the physical copies of my music, I would have to cover the losses out of my own pocket. Hard pass. Edit. Since people asked, I'll leave a link to my Bandcamp. I make industrial music, sometimes very noisy, so be ready. Sorry, we couldn't sell 12 million of your records. How do you think you'll pay us back? My husband and I were buying a house. He signed the papers right away, but I had some things to take care of, so I could only get there that evening. I arrived and immediately started reading through the loan application. Our lender sees me doing this and says, "You know, you don't have to read all of that, right? Especially since your husband already signed." I was like, "No, I want to make sure everything is the way I want it." Well, then it turns out the paperwork had us borrowing $250,000 at 25%. Yeah, absolutely not. I didn't sign anything and got out of there immediately. The lender started threatening to sue me as I left, and I told him it would be cheaper for me to go to court than to pay his insane interest rate. Since then, I'm the only one who handles our mortgage stuff, and that lender, by the way, was my husband's high school friend. Please tell me you had a serious talk with your husband. I would be furious if my husband signed such an important document without at least reading the main points. One time, when I was applying for a job, the contract said I would have to work for them for at least 4 years. Otherwise, those 4 years would count as training that I would have to pay for out of my own pocket if I left early. A while ago, our school got Wi-Fi. When I first tried to connect to it, I noticed that the terms of agreement said the school could take my phone and inspect its contents. I decided I didn't need that, and I still don't use it. Decided to buy a phone with a $200 plan. The salesperson told me they were already closing and that it would be more convenient if I came back to sign the paperwork the next day. By morning, the amount in the contract that had been sitting on the desk all night had somehow magically changed from $200 to $300. I called them out on it and went to a different store. My wife and I went to a dealership to buy our first car. We were planning to finance it because the dealership had a special offer for recent college graduates that lets you get a loan with no extra interest. Their finance guy offered us 2 loan options, one for 3 years and another for 5. While we were talking, he kept assuring us that both options were interest-free, so we agreed to the 5-year one to lower the payments. Then the same guy gives us the paperwork and rushes us to sign it as quickly as possible. But we're not completely stupid. We start reading the details. And what do you think? It turns out the 5-year loan doesn't qualify for their promotion, and under this contract we'd have to pay 6.5% extra. In my opinion, that's a lot more than zero, right? We got angry and started threatening to leave. Then they, realizing they were about to lose customers, made concessions and gave us a discount on the car. Damn, how many graduates must fall for this, signing the paperwork blindly? The guy I was renting from let me move out a month before our lease was up because he already had the next tenant lined up. To do everything legally, all he needed was my written agreement to leave early and one piece of paper that would change the terms of the original lease. When he brought it to me to sign, I decided to read it carefully because I knew the guy had recently done time for fraud. Good thing I did because there was a clause saying that if anything went wrong with the new tenant, I'd still be on the hook and would have to keep paying rent even though I no longer lived there. When I called him out on that part, he was like, "Oh yeah, I added that section just to protect myself a little." We were selling our business. My wife's car was registered to the company, but we weren't planning to sell it. When the lawyer came over, we made it clear right away that we were selling everything except the car. Guess what was in the contract he sent us a week later? Thank God we read everything carefully and managed to cross that clause out before the paperwork got to the buyer. I found a job 350 miles away from home, family and friends. The conditions were absolutely great. The interview went perfectly. Plus, I happened to meet a guy there who I had worked with for many years before. Everything seemed so good that I rented an apartment ahead of time within walking distance of the job. Formally, they had already hired me. All that was left was to bring in the signed papers. A day before I had to turn them in, I decided to take one last careful look at what I was agreeing to. And that's when I saw 3 obvious problems. I don't remember the exact wording, but I'll try to paraphrase. 1. The position you are being hired for is the only position you can ever hold at our company. Even though you may get salary increases, you will never be promoted or moved to another role. We need people who are loyal to their position. 2. We do not provide any health insurance benefits. Your health is your own responsibility. 3. If you are fired, or if you leave the company yourself, for the entire next year, you may not work for any company that has computers installed or provides internet access. I was applying there for a tech support analyst position. The salary looked excellent, but after seeing those clauses, I got out of there immediately. The 3rd clause would never hold up in court. Never. Yeah, they're mostly just scaring people who don't know any better. If your employment contract has vague clauses like that, limiting your life after you leave, you can usually ignore them because they practically never have any legal force. At my last job at a restaurant, they sent us new employment contract terms. I opened it and there was a non-compete clause. I told my coworkers about it and almost no one signed the new contract. A week later, management had to rewrite it. A non-compete? In a restaurant? What mysterious secrets is your restaurant hiding? It's so they don't quit. If you don't give people the chance to work somewhere else, they'll put up with their job until the very end. In case you're wondering whether this means you can't work anywhere else, a non-compete only works when it involves industry secrets that could give another company a huge advantage, and even then, a court still has to decide whether that restriction was reasonable or not. Usually, it's a 50-50 call. One time, I decided to sign up for a gym membership. Instead of the promised $90 a month, they charged $250 to my card. Upset that they had misled me, I went home. The next night, I barely slept because I was still angry. In the morning, I decided to call and ask if there was any way to cancel the membership, and they told me it was only possible if I moved to an area where they didn't have a gym. A day later, I read through our contract and found a clause saying the membership could be canceled within 2 weeks for any reason at all, and only 3 days had passed. After that, I got it canceled pretty quickly. Did they at least give the money back? Yep, every last cent. I went to the dealership to pick up my car. They handed me the paperwork to sign. I started reading it and found a clause saying I had to allow them to share my personal information with third parties. Absolutely not. What kind of business did you have with them? For the first time in my life, I brought my car in for repairs. They took it, fixed it, but wouldn't return it without my signature. When I found that clause, they had to delete my information from their system, after which I just took my keys and left. A mechanic dealer only has the right to refuse to return your car if you haven't paid for the work. If the bill is paid, they can't hold your car. Otherwise, it's theft, and in cases like that, you can absolutely call the police. I was looking for a new room. I went to see another apartment. I liked it so much that I was already ready to hand over the deposit, but just in case, I decided to read the house rules they had emailed me beforehand. It's worth mentioning that while I was looking at the place, they gave me another set of rules printed on paper. Those seemed overly strict to me, especially for such an expensive rental. But overall it was fine, and I understood there wasn't much I could do about it. Praise Odin that I thought to read their email. The rules in that list were completely different from what they showed me in person. There were gems like 1. If you want to bring a guest over, you must submit a written request a week in advance, and it has to be approved by every resident of the apartment. 2. Guests may only stay until 10 p.m. 3. Guests are not allowed to stay overnight. 4. When someone comes to visit you, they must leave a $20 fee to cover the cost of toilet water. I was reading all of this and thinking, so you want me to pay over $1,000 for a room and still jump through hoops just to invite friends over? After that, of course, I backed out. There were plenty of other ridiculous rules too. These are just the ones that stuck with me. $20? That must be some expensive toilet water. If I had to pay that fee, I'd do nothing but keep flushing the toilet. I was about to freelance for a media company. At the time, I was a graduate with 2 years of experience. They sent me the contract and it said, 1. Pay was £6.50 an hour. 2. They expected me to be able to work 37.5 hours a week. 3. I had to use my own car for work, with no coverage for wear and tear or fuel. And most importantly, 4. I had to give them all rights to any creative work I had produced during the 2 years before starting the new position. I turned it down. My wife and I had 3 days left to sign the contract to buy a condo. When they sent us the final version of the agreement, we noticed that our mortgage rate had suddenly gone up by a tiny amount, something like plus 0.2%. We asked what that was about, and they told us they had checked our credit history and adjusted the rate based on our current credit score. That left a bad taste in our mouths, so we decided not to sign anything. By pure coincidence, a week later, our company was bought by another company and moved us to another state. If we had bought that place, we would have had to either quit our jobs or sell it right away.